Welcome back to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a Safe Reach podcast, where we cut through the noise to give you actionable insights on building true cyber resilience, and in 15 minutes or less. I'm your host, Tova Dvorin, and joining me today is our resident expert senior sales engineer, Adrian Cully, who has deep insights into adversary emulation and simulation and all things offensive security. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing well. I hope you're well too, Tova.
I am, thank you.
Great to be here as always, and as always, ready to dive into the technical details.
Today, the technical details will be about a persistent and evolving threat that continues to challenge defenders globally. Today, we're talking about Chinese state sponsored cyber operations through the stealthy and concerning activities of Volt Typhoon. Adrian, when we talk about Nathan's state threats, China's Ministry of State Security, or MSS, along with elements of the People's Liberation Army, are undeniably among the most prolific and sophisticated actors. Can you give us a quick overview of their typical objectives?
Absolutely, Tova. Let's have a walk through the landscape of Chinese Ministry of State Security (MSS) cyber attacks. Their activities span a vast spectrum. We see everything from intellectual property theft and economic espionage to intelligence gathering. But a critical and increasingly worrying aspect is the pre-positioning of capabilities for potential disruptive or destructive attacks on critical infrastructure. These groups often operate with immense patience and a long-term strategic outlook. Unlike financially motivated ransomware groups looking for a quick payout, many Chinese state-sponsored actors are engaged in what we call cyber espionage for strategic advantage. They aim to collect intelligence, understand how our critical systems work, and embed themselves deeply within networks, sometimes for years, to maintain persistent access.
So, in other words, they're playing the long game. And their targets, I imagine, reflect that strategic objective?
Precisely. Their targets are diverse but consistently aligned with China's national interests. Defense contractors, technology firms, government agencies, and increasingly critical infrastructure across sectors like communications, energy, water, and transportation. This is where groups like Volt Typhoon truly come into play, shifting the focus from pure espionage to something far more menacing.
Sounds like menacing, while a strong word, is extra fitting for Volt Typhoon. I understand they've been on everyone's radar since around mid 2021. So, what makes this group stand out?
So, what makes Volt Typhoon particularly insidious, Tova, is its primary objective: pre-positioning within critical national infrastructure. This isn't about stealing data and leaving, it's about gaining access and maintaining persistent covert presence, effectively laying the groundwork for potential future disruption or even destruction. We're talking about a contingency plan, especially in the context of geopolitical tensions, for example, around a potential conflict over Taiwan.
And their method of operation, or their TTPs, are quite distinctive, aren't they? I've heard a lot about living off the land.
You're spot on. Their methodology is characterized by extreme stealth and an almost exclusive reliance on living off the land (LOTL) techniques. This is a crucial distinction. Instead of deploying custom malware that might trigger traditional signature based detections, Vault Typhoon extensively abuses legitimate system tools and built in network administration utilities. Think PowerShell, Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, PSExec, and other common binaries. This makes their activity incredibly difficult to distinguish from legitimate network traffic, allowing them to blend in and evade detection for extended periods.
Hmm. So, what they're doing is they're using our own tools against us. It reminds me a lot of the cybersecurity version of Aikido. How do they gain that initial foothold?
So that's a great analogy, Tova. They're both using your strengths and your weaknesses against you.
Hmm.
They often gain initial access by exploiting vulnerabilities in internet facing devices, particularly small office, home office, often called SOHO routers, firewalls, and other VPN hardware, but these often go unpatched or have weak credentials. Once inside, they pivot through these compromised edge devices, routing their command and control C2 traffic through them to obfuscate their true origin. This creates a complex network of compromised infrastructure that acts as a global anonymizing service, making attribution and tracking incredibly challenging. While recent reports from July this year, just a couple of weeks ago, suggest that US agencies have had some
Mhm.
success in disrupting these operations,
Mm.
the underlying intent and sophistication of their living off the land tactics remains a significant threat.
And this is where we really need your expertise as a senior sales engineer, Adrian. For our audience, the technical details are crucial. So, could you break down for us the specific tactics, techniques, and procedures that we should be aware of, and what indicators of compromise defenders should be hunting for?
Absolutely, Tova. Understanding these TTPs is essential for effective defense. Let's, in line with the MITRE attack framework, let's start with initial access. MITRE technique 001. They're really good at the exploitation of public facing applications, hitting vulnerabilities in edge devices. They also heavily leverage valid accounts, often using stolen or guessed legitimate credentials to walk right in. I don't need to do any amount of hacking cleverness if I can just simply log on. Once they're in for execution, it's all about commanding the scripting interpreter. They use PowerShell, Command Shell, and WMI extensively for executing commands, gathering information and moving laterally. You might see base 64 encoded PowerShell commands being used to try and hide their activity. Their defense evasion is truly their signature. That's MITRE attack technique 5. This comes from living off the land binaries. They stick to what's already on your system. PowerShell.exe, WMIC.exe, certutil.exe, bitsadmin.exe, net.exe, rundl32.exe. This makes it incredibly hard for traditional EDRs to differentiate malicious activity from legitimate activity. They will also perform very alarmingly file deletion, deleting and clearing Windows event logs and other forensic artifacts to cover their tracks. And for obfuscated files or information, they might use packers or minor custom tools like frpc.exe or fast reverse proxy or the Earthworm SOX proxy. For credential access, they go for credential dumping, like dumping LSAS memory for credentials, often using COM-SVCS DLL via rundll32.exe. They're also not shy about brute forcing against accounts. Their lateral movement often involves remote services using tools like PSExec, WMI, RDP remote desktop protocol to move between systems. Their command and control is equally stealthy. They use proxy extensively, leveraging compromised SOHO devices and legitimate proxy tunneling tools like FRP and Earthworm to establish covert C2. This traffic often blends into normal network flows, even over common ports, and they use standard application layer protocol like HTTP, HTTPS for C2, mimicking regular web browser activity.
I can't believe that's only the TTPs. That is a lot to monitor. So I'm almost afraid to ask this because we already covered a lot. But what are the key IOCs that our listeners should be looking for?
So, when hunting for Vault Typhoon, look for unusual process activity, command.exe or PowerShell.exe being invoked with strange or base 64 encoded command line arguments, lol bin abuse, suspicious use of wmc.exe, certutil.exe, bitsadmin.exe for non standard purposes, especially if it's outside of your normal IT operations. Network connections, any outbound connections for internal systems to known compromised SOHO device IPs, though these change quickly, it's difficult. Also look for connections over non-standard ports from unexpected internal systems that might indicate proxy tunneling. File system artifacts, the presence of frpc.exe or earthworm binaries in unusual directories. Obviously, any log tampering, the deletion of any logs, seems cost a lot of money, but they can't tell you anything about logs that don't exist anymore. Credential dumping tools, signs of LSAS.exe access patterns indicative of Mimikatz or similar tools.
Adrian, the sheer stealth and reliance on living off the land tactics by Volt Typhoon present a huge logistical challenge. We see that traditional perimeter defenses and signature based detections just aren't cutting it anymore. So, what do you think are the broader implications of that? And how can we leverage tools like Safe Breach to counter this logistical issue?
So as always, what we want to be doing, Tova, is building cyber resilience with Safe Breach. You've really hit on the core challenge. This isn't just a perimeter problem, it's an internal visibility and control challenge. These threats highlight that we need to continuously validate our security posture from the inside out. This is precisely where adversary emulation and breach and attack simulation, which is what we do at SafeBreach, becomes indispensable. We empower organizations to understand their true adversarial exposure by safely and continuously simulating attacks that mimic real-world threat actors like Vault Typhoon.
So we're essentially fighting fire with fire, or in this case, TTPs with TTPs. How does Safe Reach specifically help there?
SafeBreach has three very detailed Vault Typhoon scenarios. We know a huge amount about Vault Typhoon across the kill chain, from infiltration, host level activities, lateral movement activities, through to exfiltration. We recommend you validate your living off the land detection. Can your EDI SIEM truly detect the use of PowerShell for credential dumping or WMI for lateral movement, even when it looks like legitimate activity? SafeBreach can simulate these exact TTPs without introducing any actual risk to your live systems. Test command and control. Are your network segmentation and egress filterings robust enough to prevent covert C2 channels established through proxies or over common ports? Our platform can emulate these communications, showing you exactly where the gaps are. Assess critical infrastructure hardening. Our clients in critical infrastructure, for them, we run specific scenarios that test the resilience of both operational technology, OT, and specific critical IT systems against the prepositioning and potential disruptive techniques employed by state-sponsored groups like Vault Typhoon. And lastly, optimize logging and alerts. By running these simulations, you can identify gaps in your logging configurations and fine-tune your security alerts. This helps you reduce alert fatigue and ensures you're highlighting genuine threats that would otherwise go unnoticed, especially those blending into legitimate traffic.
So, as always, we're shifting from the reactive, if they breach, then what, to a proactive, can they breach, or rather, they will breach, and how quickly can we stop them mentality.
Precisely, Tova. In the last 3 years, we've had two actionable advisories regarding Vault Typhoon, AA24038A, AA23144A. Again, we have complete emulations for both of these advisories. In a world where adversaries are patient, persistent, and living off the land, proactive validation is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. You need to know with confidence that your defenses can withstand the very attacks that matter most. The only way to truly build cyber resilience against sophisticated threats like Vault Typhoon is to continuously test, measure, and optimize your security posture against their evolving TTPs.
Adrian, thank you so much for that incredibly insightful and actionable breakdown. It's clear that understanding the adversary at this level is paramount.
My pleasure, Tova. It's what we live for.
And thank you for joining us on the Cyber Resilience Brief. Stay vigilant, stay secure, and stay safe with SafeBreach. We'll see you next time. The Cyber Resilience Brief is a SafeBreach podcast. It's produced by Tova Devorin and executive produced by Adrian Cully. Sound design provided by Adobe Podcasts. Distribution provided by Podbean, and extra support and love from the SafeBreach team. For more information on how adversarial exposure validation through SafeBreach can protect you and your business, no matter where you reside or what industry you're in, please visit us at www.safebreach.com.